Welcome everybody. Good to see you here. Welcome to everybody online connecting through Facebook, YouTube, or social media, and we'd like to also invite you all to bring your comments or questions through the live chat. We've got Carol here monitoring, so thanks, Carol. And to remind everybody that we were supposed to have a barbecue yesterday, but the weather had a different opinion, so we're postponing our barbecue to September 10th, so in 2 Saturdays. Hopefully we'll be able to meet and have a barbecue together at the park. It's still the same park, North Glenmore Park, different picnic site. But Carol will share more information through our social media channels with more details. So it wasn't yesterday, but it'll be in a couple Saturdays. And today we will be talking about mediumship, and to start, we're going to take a text from the book Our Daily Bread, and it's text 122, entitled Sin and Sinner, and it's from a passage in John where it says, "Beloved, do not follow evil but the good. The one who does good is of God, but the one who does evil has not seen God." And then Emmanuel brings a reflection saying that human society should not divide itself into camps where the good are on the side and the evil are on another side. Instead, it should live as a huge family that includes spirits that have begun to understand the Father and spirits that have not yet managed to sense Him. Of course, for many years to come, the words evil and wickedness will continue to appear in dictionaries, defining certain mental attitudes of a lower order. However, one must agree that the question of evil has been receiving new interpretations in human knowledge. The evangelist gives us the correct idea about evil. John does not say that wicked individuals have been exiled from our Father, or that they are kept apart from creation. John merely affirms that they have not seen God. This does not mean that we should just fold our arms before the poisonous weeds and pestilent areas on a path. However, it does oblige us to remember that the farmer does not pull thorn bushes and refuse from the soil in order to leave it full of holes. Many believe that fallen men and women should be done away with forever. But Jesus did not look at it like that. Whenever he lovingly addressed the sinner, he knew that before anything else, he was facing an unwell, unhappy person, from whom the distinguishing marks of eternity could not be taken. Fight crime, but help the individual who has become entangled in its dark web. The Master pointed out the constant battle against evil, but he awaits true fraternity among humans as the sublime milestone of the heavenly kingdom. Welcome.
Sorry, it was hard to find a spot for today.
It's busy out there, yeah. Okay, so let us harmonize ourselves through prayer, and just taking a deep breath. Elevating our thoughts into our Master Jesus, who saw us all as equals, capable of loving, of sharing, of fraternally harmonizing our relationships. We ask you, Jesus, that you be with us here today, that you inspire all of us, that you open our hearts to your words, to your thoughts, to your feelings, so we can appreciate the time spent in communion with God. Thanks to our Lord as well for the opportunity to be here tonight and share in this hour together. Master Jesus, may your grace be with us tonight, forever and ever. So be it. So, computer decided to freeze on me, so while I get this fixed. So today we'll be talking about mediumship, and it's a series of talks that we've been doing because we had a lot of our members asking about mediumship. So we thought, why not do a series of talks so we can touch on quite a few important things about mediumship, since it is something that's very prominent. It's sometimes the face of Spiritism, but sometimes it's not well understood. And today is our fourth talk, and it's going to be around the moral sense in guiding our mediumship. So how can we utilize the Spiritist doctrine and the teachings of Jesus to help create our moral sense, our moral guide, so it can help us foster a mediumship that it's healthy and that can bring light into our lives and to the lives of others. So, okay, as I was saying, this is part 4, moral sense guiding our mediumship. We've already talked about a few passages before, and we still have a couple more to go after today. Just to highlight where we get all this information from, we use a lot of materials from the Spiritist Federation from the state of Mato Grosso in Brazil, called Fraternity. And this one is a series of talks that Lacordaire Jacobson did around mediums and mediumship. So it was a whole weekend that they did quite a few talks. So these are all based on those. And as far as literature goes, we have a few books here from our Spiritist doctrine. Mostly the Medium's book, the Gospel, and then a few others as well. And oh my goodness, there's some real issues with the computer today. Oh man, hold on. Okay, we're there now. No. I have to just do it without presentation today. I'm just, excuse me guys, I'm going to have to grab my computer.
The joys of technology.
So, where was I? Well, in the meantime, okay. Interesting. I don't know what happened, but the presentation I made today didn't get saved. And I even practiced it this morning. But anyhow, let's...
Do you have any Portuguese? Or
Nope.
just have no?
No, we're going to have to wing it today.
Oh my
So when Carol asked if I was ready this morning, not really. Okay, so, and I apologize because it's in English, so there won't be much to read on here. So, yeah, let's see what happens. So, when we're talking about mediumship, one of the main things that we wanted to bring, and we talk about this in every talk that we do here around mediumship, is what is a medium? Who is a medium? What does it mean to be a medium? And I'd like to ask you, what is your guys' thoughts of who's a medium and what does it mean to be a medium? If you have any thoughts or ideas of what that is. And it's interesting because the medium's book here in item 158 talks about 159 talks about mediums, and they say that every individual that has a sense of the influence that spirits have on them is a medium. So anybody who in any degree can sense spirits, that means to be a medium. And then he says that mediumship is inherent to humankind, meaning that all of us, in a certain degree, is a medium. And understanding that we're all mediums brings us an idea that mediums are then not special, that since everyone is a mediumship is not something that is a privilege to anybody. It's something that, since we all are, there is no privilege around it. Because we still have quite a bit of us who think that mediums are higher, more moralized spirits, or that are people that have a better sense of morality, when in turn, that's not the case, because mediumship, again, is with everybody, all of us. So, however, when you talk about mediumship, usually we refer to mediumship as those who have a heightened sense of the spiritual world, that they can communicate with spirits, that they can write through, that spirits can write through them, spirits can speak to them, and so on and so forth. So that here we call ostensive mediums. So those are the mediums who have a higher degree of sensitivity with mediums, right? So what we're saying is that everybody's a medium, but those who have a higher sense is usually what we refer to as mediums. And so that's a bit of a general information around mediumship and around mediums. And we brought this in every single talk that we did, and hopefully that gets more and more, builds more and more awareness of what that means. And so, yeah, I can't get it. There are some passages from another book that I wanted to bring. Anyhow, and then the other thing that we wanted to talk about is something that Leon Denis brings to us here, and that one I do have here. It's around when he talks about mediumship. He describes that good mediumship is formed slowly, in calm, silent, collected study, away from worldly pleasures and turmoil of passions. So this brings us the idea that mediumship is a faculty that can help us moralize ourselves. Through mediumship, we're able to develop a lot of our virtues. In utilizing mediumship in our lives, we can develop, for example, when we're forming it slowly, we can develop our patience. When we're forming our mediumship in a calm and silent environment, we can develop our serenity. Collected study, we can develop our discernment, we can develop our perseverance. And then away from worldly pleasures and turmoil of passions, Leon Denis here is bringing us the idea that mediumship is something that has to be, or should be, worked on within us first. Everything that we do in mediumship, firstly, is for us, is for the medium, for them to reflect upon and to understand. So that's what Leon Denis brings to us about mediumship and how fruitful it can be for many of us. And when we talk about mediumship as being a faculty, a tool that we have, a tool that God has given to us to help us in this incarnation throughout our lives, we always think about, well, how should I develop my mediumship then? What way should I develop my mediumship? And just like with anything that we were given by God, our hands or arms or whatever that may be, we always look for instruction on how to use it. Our hands, for example, our parents teach us to write, to eat. Our arms, they teach us to hug, and so on and so forth. So mediumship as something that was given to us by God. What is a good way for us to use it? Where can we find instructions to help us develop it and use it in a good way? And we always like to bring then the concept of mediumship with Jesus. And there are quite a few talks in the Spiritist world talking about mediumship with Jesus. Why Jesus? Well, in the Spirit's book, that first one, in question 625, right, we have this question: what is the perfect standard of that God has given to humankind as a guide and as a model? And the answer was, look at Jesus. So in Jesus we can find a lot that we need to develop our mediumship and to develop our sense of morality. And we can also find a lot of information on the Medium's book, because the Medium's book not only provides us a lot of the technical things about mediumship, but it also provides a whole different area of mediumship that's not often touched, which is the moral of the medium. So one helps us understand more about the faculty. The second part of the Medium's book helps us understand how to utilize it, how to use it, and build that sense of moral, which is the focus of our talk today. And when it comes to mediumship with Jesus, we've been bringing a different reflection in every single talk. And the one that I wanted to bring today was around a passage from Jesus in Matthew 11, 28 and 29, when Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take upon my yoke and learn from me, for I am humble and gentle in heart." And I wanted to focus on the passage where Jesus invites us to learn from him, and understanding that Jesus is inviting us to be apprentices. He's inviting us to be apprentices of his words, of his examples. So how can we bring this to mediumship? What does it mean then to develop our mediumship with Jesus? It means to develop our mediumship with that apprentice feeling. What does that mean? What does it mean to, for example, develop our mediumship with what we call the virtue of being an apprentice of Christ?
I guess for me it's at the same time that you are developing your mediumship, you're in a path of improving yourself. So you're practicing your virtues, trying to be a better person. So those two are very connected, and it will help each other. So as long as you're practicing and trying to know your egocentric feelings, for example, you can also at the same time be practicing your mediumship, and those are going to be connecting with each other all the time.
Yeah, that's a great reflection, Carol. Thank you. And it does speak to the humility that the apprentice feeling brings to us, right? Understanding that we don't know it all. And in mediumship, that that can be tricky, because especially those who haven't developed a sense of moral, that communication with spirit can give the medium the sense that they don't need to learn anything else, that everything they need to learn, the spirits will tell them. It's a common process when mediumship starts to develop in people. So again, Christ asks us to be apprentices, understanding that no matter how many spirits talk through us or how much we can write through spirit, that we can always be apprentices learning from Christ, that we will never know it all, that there's always room for us to learn from him and to develop that sense of moral. The other portion of this is, and it's something again that Kardec talks about in the Medium's book, which is around those of us who understand mediumship as being just the communication itself. So to highlight and to explain a little bit about that, it's around the fact when we believe that if spirits write through me, if I'm able to write, or if spirits can speak through me, that's all that is about mediumship. So if I can do that, it's like I have achieved the highest level of mediumship, for example, which means that if I can do that already, then why do I have to bother studying about it if I can already write and if I can already speak, right? And again, the apprentice feeling shows us that no matter how well we write, there's again always things that we can learn from Jesus, from the books around Spiritism. Because again, the thing that will lead us and help us guide our development of mediumship is our sense of moral. And our morals, we will never exhaust the learnings around our morals, right? We can always get better and improve and learn more and develop a more solid moral basis. And Jesus, as our guide and model, is what we always like to use as an example for us to evolve. Now I got to remember what else I was going to talk about.
I'm not sure if you're going to talk about that later, but as you said before, the mediumship is like a hand. No, not a computer. Like you can use it. It's a tool. Let's say that. Mm-hmm. That you can use for good or bad, depending on how you guide the mediumship. So if we are developing, as Carol said, our virtues and we keep trying to improve, then we are opening ourselves to the help of the good spirits that can guide us. So yes, maybe I can write, the spirits can write through me, but do I know what kind of spirits are communicating through me? Do I know if what they are saying is something that I should be passing on to other people? Mm-hmm. So all of this requires that studying, that understanding, that kind of like not just developing my morals, because it's first for me, the mediumship, like everything, all the learnings are first for us. But at the same time, we have a responsibility. Like if we are passing on information, we're passing on communications, we also have that responsibility. So how do we know if this is truthful or not, right? So it's the constant studying and improving and and trying to be better selves.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's an excellent point, Anna. Especially around how the confidence that we sometimes put on the spirits, that we think that we're always being guided by good spirits, that can blind us to always think they're right, and to remove any discernment around analyzing what they give us. And the whole idea of the moral sense that we'll talk about today is where we take the communications, and with our morals, we screen it. We make sure that it is in line with what Spiritism is saying, and then we can maybe go ahead and share that. But the moral sense invites us to not believe blindly, but to analyze it, to judge it. And we have some specifics around that here. And the thing that I'm also going to bring is a passage from a few books. One of them called Obras Póstumas in Portuguese, or posthumous works, where Kardec shows us exactly that, and it's actually beautiful to see. And I think I might have been able to recover my presentation soon. I really hope so.
Multitasking.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you, Anna, for sharing that. And this is the one. Perfect. So now we're going to jump into talking about our morals. All of this were like things that we talked about in previous talks. So now we're going to jump in and talk about today's topic. And the first reflection that Lacordaire, who was the person who gave this talk to us, he wanted to reflect about the words morals and the word sense, because again we're talking about the moral sense around mediumship. So oh God, no, it's not there.
Oh my
Goodness. One day I'll
Did
get
you
it.
find the book?
Yeah, I got it.
Obras Póstumas?
I think I got it. Okay, now we're good. So that's everything. Hopefully I spoke correctly. Apologize if any of the passages from Jesus weren't exactly right. Reflecting then about the moral sense, right? Lacordaire brings the reflection about what is sense, right? If we're talking about developing moral sense. So sense, he says, is the act of reasoning, appreciating, and judging. Having sense is having a clear judgment and understanding and having prudence and discernment. A person who's sensible, for us Portuguese speakers, that word sometimes is confusing. In English we have sensitive and sensible. Those are very different. So here is the sensible person, right? That's an adjective that characterizes the one who has common sense, who makes use of reason, and who acts judiciously. Judiciously means prudentialmente. So this is showing us that somebody who's developing their sense means that we're starting to analyze something, to judge something, to reflect something. And then we tack on the morals, and the moral is the set of rules acquired through the culture of education, of tradition, of daily life that guides human behavior within a society, whose meaning is relative to custom. So it's interesting here that moral, when we look at it, it has to do with our culture, meaning that we have different morals around a country, around a city, around a globe, right? So if we ask somebody, and a very vivid example that Lacordaire uses is, for us, if we ask the question, is it right to demoralize women over men? We can instantly hear around us, we can say, no, it's not. But if we go to different areas of the world, the answer might be different. Why? Because morals, again, are particular to a tradition, to a culture. So the focus of Spiritism is to teach us morals, but the moral from Christ. The moral that is based upon the divine laws. Why that is? Because the divine laws, as we talk about quite often, the divine laws, they don't change. because they are divine laws. They came from God. And because they don't change, they're not dependent on our culture. They're not dependent on the region. So the goal here is to develop a moral that's detached from our culture, and that it's more and more in line with the divine laws. And then when you combine the two, sense of moral, meaning utilizing our moral, utilizing what we think is correct to analyze, to judge how we're behaving and the communications that we get from Spirit, and so on and so forth. Lacordaire asks a question. I'm a little behind schedule. Lacordaire asks a question, and he says, does the Spiritist doctrine have any flaws? Does the Spiritist doctrine have any flaws? And he says that no, the Spiritist doctrine doesn't have any flaws, and that's because it doesn't tell us what's right and what's wrong. It tries to teach us a moral and help us think so we can arrive at conclusions whether things are right or wrong. So by teaching us about the moral, that doesn't, it's not saying, this is correct, this is not correct, because again, what's correct and what's not depends on where we are, depends on the culture and the tradition. So by teaching us and building a Christian moral, it helps us think for ourselves and as a result come up with our own conclusions. So that's what the Spiritist doctrine, one of the things it's trying to do again, is to build our moral around the moral of Christ. And then we have a passage in the Bible, John chapter 14, where Thomas asks Jesus, he says, Lord, we don't know where you're going, so how can we know the way? So basically, Thomas is asking Jesus, how can we know the way? How can we know the direction? And Jesus answered, and it's a very famous quote by him. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Right? It's even the title of a book from Chico Xavier. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Lord, to the Father, except through me. So again, Jesus here was inviting us to follow him, because he is the way, he is the truth, and he is the life. Because not only are his teachings something that can show us the way, but he actually physically showed us the way by his own examples. And then in that same passage, John 14, just a little bit later, he tells us something that's really interesting, especially for Spiritists, because he says, if you love me, keep my commands, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to help you and be with you forever, the Spirit of truth. So Jesus, at that time, almost 2,000 years ago, he was teaching his disciples, and he was already saying that in the future, I'm going to send somebody else. I'm going to send something else. What he calls another advocate to help you and be with you forever. So he was promising us to give us something else to help us, to guide us, to be able to relive a lot of the teachings that he gave us, and also bring us a little bit more. So what is this advocate that he promised us? He says that it's the Spirit of truth. And when we go to the Gospel according to Spiritism, we have some messages from the Spirit of truth, who is Jesus himself. And that can help us conclude and drive us to the conclusion that this promised advocate that Jesus talked about is the Spiritist doctrine itself. Because it's a doctrine, it means that it can be with us forever. So when we're talking about how to find the direction, how to find the way, how to guide us, Jesus is one of them because he said so, and the second one is the Spiritist doctrine, again, because he promised us that could help us. And we always like to bring examples. And we have many, many examples throughout history that can show us a lot about mediumship development, about utilizing Christ to guide us. So a bit of trivia quiz. Can anybody tell me what that is? Right in the center?
St. Paul's Cathedral.
Perfect. St. Paul's Cathedral. So the example that we're using here is St. Paul, or Paul of Tarsus. He's an example that we use quite a bit around here because there's so much we can learn from him. And there is a book called Paul and Stephen by Sheikh Xavier, who describes his life beautifully. So when we're thinking about Paul and we're thinking about his moral development, at the very start, after he met with Christ in the road to Damascus, he started writing, and one of the things that he wrote was that all the good that I want to do, I don't do, and all the evil that I don't want to do, I end up doing. So this is something that he said usually around the beginning, and so we can hear now Paul saying that all the good things that he wanted to do, he didn't do. All the evil things that he didn't want to do, he would still do them anyway. And then he started to use Christ as his guiding light, using Christ as his way. And throughout his life, as we get through his passages, it gets to a point where he says, I can do it all through him who strengthens me. So we go from a Paul that couldn't do any good to a Paul that's now saying that he can do it all, that he can do everything through him, through Christ, who gives him the strength. Fast forward a little bit more of his evolution through Christ. It gets to a point where he says, it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. So you can see the development of Paul here from not being able to do any good to saying that it's no longer him who lives, but Christ who lives in him. Meaning that he was so aligned with Christ, his communion with Christ was so intrinsic that he said that it was Christ living through him. So, in one lifetime, he was able to do all that. One of the reasons was that in every difficulty that he had, instead of reacting, he would always look at his moral sense and look at Christ to help him take the next step. He was always going back to Christ to help him guide his way. And if you read Paul and Stephen, you might remember that right after he met Christ, he went blind. Right after. And we can make a reflection and guess that the whole reason, or one of the reasons for Paul to go blind was that now that he had all this learning and all this teaching from Christ, the first thing that happened to him was an invitation for him to go within, to take all those learnings, all those teachings, and reflect upon himself. Hence the blindness. Like he wasn't able to look at the outside world, but he was being invited now to look within. So with every learning, with every teaching, with everything new, the first thing that Paul was invited to do was to bring it to himself, to reflect, and to put his moral sense to the test. But he didn't do that. When he got healed, first thing that he did was try to go out there and convince everybody that Christ was right. And that didn't go very well. He got very disappointed because people actually started to go against him and didn't believe him anymore. So it didn't go the way that he was hoping. So then he finally realized that, okay, maybe I need to work on myself first. Maybe the teachings that I got from Christ are first for me, first for myself. So then he went on a trip to the desert to specifically reflect and build his moral sense, which would guide him throughout his life. So again, another great example from Paul. And then we bring this to mediumship. What we can what we can get from this is the fact that a lot of times in our, especially our ostensive mediumship, so when all of a sudden we start getting messages from Spirit, when we start writing through Spirit, remembering that every time we get something new, the first ones invited to use that is ourselves. So when we get those messages from the first time and we have this anxiety to get it out there and to give it to everybody, to first reflect, hold on, maybe those are for me first. And once we reflected, once we bring it to ourselves, then maybe look into broadcasting it. And we'll talk about how Kardec did this so beautifully. So, I've touched upon this a little bit already, but remember how I said that the Medium's book not only brings us the technicalities around mediumship, but there's a lot in this book that talks about the moral influence of the medium. So it's not only getting good at the faculty itself, being able to write, but it's developing the moral so we know how to use it. And to do that, Kardec in question, item 226, he actually asked the question. He says, is the development of mediumship related to the moral development of mediums? Yes or no? What do you guys think?
I think it is.
So, there's a flip side to that. So, in itself, no. So, the development of mediumship is not related to the moral of medium, because mediumship is a faculty. It's like having a hand and being able to use it. Mediumship is a faculty that is rooted in the organism, regardless of the morale. Again, so it's an organic faculty, having the ability to sense spirit to a heightened degree, regardless of moral. But then he keeps going. He says, the same, however, does not happen with its use, which can be good or bad, according to the medium's qualities. So that's where the moral comes in, right? It's how we use it. That's what dictates whether the medium is good or bad. Not the ability itself, but how they use it. And skip this one. Oh no, I think we have time actually. When we talk about like the good intentions of mediums, right? As we're receiving messages from Spirit, we always have a good intention to give this out to other people, and because we think that's going to help them. So that good intention is always there. And Lacordaire, who gave this talk, he makes the joke that he said his mom used to say that the world is full of good intentions, but bad directions. So the good intention is almost always there, but we don't have the right direction, and that's what ends up causing some issues. And then in the Spirit's book, Kardec actually asks something around that. He says, there are people who are animated by good intentions, and who nevertheless do not stop being obsessed. What then is the best way to get rid of obsessing spirits? And in our next talk, we'll be focusing on spiritual obsession, so we'll develop this topic a lot more. But obsessing spirits, that simply means that when you have a spirit that's constantly influencing you or constantly giving you a thought, and in varying degrees. That's, in a nutshell, what obsession is. And it's interesting because the answer that the spirits give to Kardec is that to get rid of obsessing spirits, he says, wearing their patience, putting no value on suggestions, showing them that they're wasting their time. That way, they realize they can't do anything and they'll walk away. So, sometimes we have the notion or the idea that, the spirits that are obsessing us, they're bad, that we need to get rid of them. That sometimes we have bad feelings towards them, we sometimes can hate them, and so on and so forth. So it develops a pretty bad relationship there. The essence of this answer here is that the spirits are not driving or focusing the attention on the obsessor. It's not talking anything about the obsessor himself or herself. But the invitation that the spirits are doing here is for us to, again, look into our thoughts. Look within. What can we do to put no value on their suggestions? So whatever thoughts they're influencing us to, are we giving any food for it? Are we giving a lot of time or real estate for those thoughts, or are we just, not giving attention to them, and creating our own serenity, creating our own creating our own patience. So basically what the answer is saying is, instead of focusing on trying to push them away, look within. Develop, again, our moral sense. Don't give attention to those thoughts. And that, as a result, will make them go away. So again, focusing on our own selves. So much so that in this book here, The Gospel According to Spiritism, the Spirit of Truth, he tells us a very good guiding light that we usually use for Spiritists. He says that the true Spiritist is recognized by his moral transformation and by the efforts that he uses to tame his bad inclinations. Right? So we can use this, our efforts to tame our bad inclinations. So whenever we're being influenced by a spirit that doesn't want good things for us, we can tame those thoughts, right? And we can give attention to something else. We can use the way, the truth, and the life to guide us.
It's important to practice the self-knowledge, because then we'll kind of know, oh, those thoughts are not mine.
Very good.
Am I having this insistent kind of thoughts? So to recognize some bad thoughts may be ours.
Yeah, true.
But then, we'll kind of feel it.
Yeah.
What is and what's not, right?
Absolutely. That's a great point on our self-awareness, our self-knowledge. So we're able to discern there. Where is that coming from, right? Perfect. So the part that I wanted to bring, I'm so glad I found this. It's, again, from the book Obras Posthumas, from Allan Kardec. And he talks about how the Spiritist doctrine came about. And since we're talking about our moral sense, again, developing that moral sense, I wanted to bring a few passages that show the moral sense around Spiritism and its creation. So he says, and I apologize for all the text, but I found it really good. He says that, as everyone knows, the idea of existence of intermediary beings between God and man is not new. So Spiritism did not come to unveil the spirits, right? There's always been known facts about the existence of something in between us and God. In general, however, everyone assumed that these beings were a creation of their own. Religions designated them by names of angels and demons, providing that such beings are nothing but the souls of man at different degrees of a spiritual scale. So Spiritism comes in to reintegrate creation into the grand unity that is the very essence of divine laws. So what's the same? So he was saying that religions would take these beings in between man and God and classify them as angels and demons, and cause the divisiveness, right? So Spiritism then came to show that angels and demons, they're nothing else than souls of man. They're all spirits in a different degree of morality, basically. And what does that mean? It means that it reintegrates them into one unity. It shows us that we are all spirits, removing any divisiveness, but just showing that we are all the same. We're all spirits in varying degrees of morality. So again, that sense of moral, the development of our sense of moral is what will dictate where our evolution is. And then he says, Spiritism therefore reveals unity. It reveals harmony and justice in creation. So again, Spiritism comes to show us that there is unity, that there is harmony, and that there is justice in creation. When we realize that we're all spirits and that we can all, throughout our effort, right, evolve our moral sense, grow in that scale, and eventually become angels, that brings justice and that brings harmony and unity to humanity. Showing that demons are backward souls, still pregnant with humanity's vices, and that the angels are these same purified and dematerialized souls. And so again, demons and angels are spirits, but again, their degree of evolution is what differs them. And then between these two extreme points, angels and demons, the multitude of souls in different degrees of the progressive scale, which is where, we come in. In this way, Spiritism establishes solidarity between the spiritual world and the corporeal or worldly, earthly world. So we can see, again, when we read this, we can start to see how Spiritism, again, is bringing immorality. He's not saying that, demons are bad, angels are good. He's not showing us what's good and what's bad. But again, he's developing our morals by showing that, it's a scale. And as we evolve our morality, we go from one to the other. So we're not picking sides anymore. And then he goes on to say, one of the first results that I gathered from my observations was that spirits, being nothing more than the souls of man, did not possess either full wisdom or integral science. That the knowledge that they had was limited to the degree they had reached in advance, and that their opinion had the value of only a personal opinion. This is really important for mediumship and for anyone reading something from Spirit. So this is Kardec at the very start, at the very beginning, when he was getting the first communications to develop the Spiritist doctrine, right? He was already thinking about that. Because he had a moral sense. He wasn't just receiving messages and believing them blindly, but he had a moral, he had a sense. So he was analyzing them all against one another and trying to decipher, what was true. So he said that in the beginning, right, it was clear to him that spirits were no other or no more than souls of men. And that whatever they wrote, whatever they gave us, was in line with their personal opinion, with their moral evolution. Right? If they were, for example, superior spirits, they would have a much bigger, much greater knowledge. So, again, this brings us the importance of developing our moral sense when analyzing texts, especially that we receive, especially nowadays with the ease of communication. And then he said, recognize from the beginning this truth preserved me from the serious mistake of believing in the infallibility of spirits, and prevented me from formulating premature theories based on what had been said by one or some of them. And in mediumship, like we talked about, actually Anna talked about this, right? It's ignorance. Spirits are infallible, meaning they make no mistake. So wrongly believing that they make no mistake can be pretty tricky, which this awareness that Kardec had prevented him from making premature theories, which we thank him for. It was quite the dedication. And this is the one that I wanted to bring, which speaks to the moral of Kardec. And remember what we talked about Paul, when he first got that revelation from Christ. Instead of bringing within, he went directly to try and get and send it to everybody else and convert everybody else. Kardec tells us that as he was getting these messages, at first, he says, I only focused on educating myself. So when he was getting all those messages, the first thing that he did was educating himself. Later, when I saw that it constituted such whole teachings, and that it had gained the proportions of the doctrine, then, only then, did he have the idea of publishing the teachings received for the instruction of everybody. It was those same questions that successively developed and formed the basis of the Spirit's book. So Kardec is telling us here that the first thing that he did was to take those teachings and learn and educate himself. And then, from the comparison and the fusion of many of the answers that he got, he coordinated, he classified them. He often retouched in the silence of meditation. So look at the carefulness that he used, how meticulous he was with those messages before publishing them, before getting it out to the public. So you can see all the effort, all the focus before bringing them out to the public, because he knew the responsibility that comes when we start to share. And then he finally said, that's how he prepared the first edition of the Spirit's book, delivered publicly on April 18th, 1857. So that was a few notes on Kardec and using his example. Right? He, I think it was really nice to hear that first sentence, to see how he behaved when he got the first his first communications. And I still have a few minutes. Lacordaire, the person again who gave this talk, he gave us an anecdote, something that happened to him. He said that there's a man called Mr. Praeiro, Seu Praeiro, who was one of the founders of the FENTE, which is the Federação Espírita do Estado de Mato Grosso. So one of the founders, Mr. Praeiro, late in his life, he got cancer, and then he wasn't able to go to the Spiritist Center as he was doing so. But then at one point he got better. And then Lacordaire went to pick him up, drive to the Spiritist Center. And then when Mr. Praeiro got to the Spiritist Center, he looked down the hall and he opened a smile and he was really happy. And then Lacordaire asked him, he was like, "So Praeiro, are you happy right now?" And his answer was something that stuck with Lacordaire for quite a bit, because he said that I am immensely happy because work is the blessed way for us to lovingly give back what life incessantly invests in us. This sounds a lot better in Portuguese. So I'll say it in Portuguese because it sounds a lot better. So Seu Praeiro, né, chegou naquele centro espírita pela primeira vez depois de vários meses sem estar lá. E ele chega e olha naquele corredor e esboça um sorriso. E daí Lacordaire pergunta para ele, né, Seu Praeiro, você está feliz nesse momento? E daí o Seu Praeiro fala, Lacordaire, eu estou imensamente feliz, porque o trabalho é a forma abençoada de nós devolvermos carinhosamente aquilo que caridosamente a vida incessantemente investe em nós. Eu diria que um trabalho, principalmente, né, com a doutrina espírita, a gente muitas vezes pode sentir isso que Seu Praeiro falou, né? Tanto é que, so much so that in the Gospel according to Spiritism, we have this instruction from the Spirit of Truth that Spiritists love one another. Here is the first teaching, and educate yourselves. Here is the second, right? And when he told us to love one another, and then to educate yourselves, we can reflect about what we talked about here today, about our moral sense. When we're reflecting about our moral sense, is that an act of love? reflecting about our own life, right? Learning from it, trying to be better. That is an act of love, first and foremost with ourselves, right? And so I want to leave you with the one request from Jesus, which Sania talked about last time. You know, all that Jesus asked us, all he asked us, was to love one another as he loved us. So it's a simple request, and it's a request that can bring us a lot of fulfillment and a lot of happiness. So that's everything I wanted to bring. I apologize for the in the first half. It was a little bumpy, but yeah. And we'll continue to talk about mediumship for a couple more Sundays, so we can wrap up this talk. Any questions or comments? No. Great. So we'll end in a prayer, and then we'll go to our passes. And so if we were to close our eyes and picture Jesus in front of us, speaking to our hearts and asking us to love one another as he loves us constantly. Master, we thank you for your help, for your inspiration, and we hope that we can use your words, your love, as our way, as our truth, guiding our lives. We'd like to ask our Father for the opportunity to be here today, spending this hour together, and building slowly and strengthening slowly our connection, our communion with God. Jesus, thank you for showing us the way. Thank you for giving us the words and kindness. And may we find in yourself the guiding light and the solution that we seek in our daily struggles. Tomorrow and for the time and future to come. And so be it.